The primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County.
Bridget and we are back. We're back from break. We're back with the second half of the season. I am so excited to have everybody listen and unpack this with us. We are finishing strong. I feel like we have some amazing interviews this semester. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And today we have Stefanie, who is the co-founder of Lilly's Voice, which is a nonprofit that provides AugCom devices to kids in the US. She started this journey as a driven mother, determined to help her own non-speaking autistic daughter with communication. And now she's become her own expert and go-to person for AAC devices and assistance and inspiration. Despite working a full-time job and homeschooling her daughter, Stefanie has spent many years helping families worldwide with all things AAC and autism. And she's teamed up with numerous SLPs to create content and AAC training. She's spoken at conferences and on podcasts. She's even gone into elementary schools to train teachers and school SLPs on AAC devices. So I'm excited to dive into the episode with Stefanie. But before we do so, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how most GLPs are multimodal communicators and how they can be, communicating with different stages in various forms of communication. Do you have any insight onto that, Laura?
Well, I mean, I think Lily's such a great example of it, right? And her mom does such an amazing job of honoring all forms of her communication. She has some spoken words, and she has Proloquo2Go and uses that beautifully. And there's some amazing videos that Stefanie has shared about how they've adapted that and customized it to they haven't lost the core vocabulary, but they also have some of those gestalts and phrases for efficiency that really speak to how she processes and uses language too. But I think I see it all the time where we might have somebody who can speak in a gestalt or speak even in a one word or like maybe some jargon with their gestalt, but then you put a device in front of them and they can put some grammar together. And it's just such a beautiful thing. We know that there's some overlap with apraxia and that can kind of there's complex communication needs with that diagnosis. So whether it's that or dysregulation, we know that AAC can support someone and you might see that they are able to get some more flexible grammar when you put that in front of them. So I think it all just depends, but it's so important to honor. It just goes back to honoring how they're communicating in whatever fashion that is and not putting speech above AAC or gestures. And how about you? Anything else? Any other students that come to mind?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, like you had mentioned before, is just accepting what they're able to produce. They could be in varying stages when you have a com in front of them versus when they're choosing to use verbal speech or gestures or communication, but just as adults, supporting them, taking what is their natural form of communication and just making sure that we're supporting them and making them feel comfortable. It's whatever communication kind of comes out. So let's go ahead and dive on into the episode with Stefanie and hear all about Lilly and get some tips on Proloquo2Go.
Let's do it.
Welcome to another episode of AAC Innovative Solutions. I am going to let Stefanie, or Lily's mom, introduce herself.
Yeah, hi. I am Stefanie, proud mother of 11-year-old Lilly. She is non-speaking. She's autistic. She has apraxia. She is a GLP, and she is absolutely my favorite human being on the planet. She's just so cool. I'm obsessed with her. And I am also the president and co-founder of a nonprofit called Lilly's Voice, named after my daughter, Lilly. that provides AAC devices to children ages 2 to 18 who have not been able to get them through conventional means if they've tried and failed, or they live in an area where they're not able to get access. That is what my nonprofit does. And I can explain more about that in a minute.
Sure. Can you give us an overview of what Lily's language development and AAC journey looked like?
Oh, absolutely. So Lily, like I mentioned, she is non-speaking and has apraxia. She never had words or, barely any babbling as a little one. I mean, we actually started this autism journey really early. We started testing at like 8 months old, and she was diagnosed at 14 months old. And she's never had words, so there was no regression. So we've always been focused on communication. But granted, this was.
And Stefanie, what were the things that you saw at 8 months old that made you request an eval?
Well, it wasn't just at 8 months old. Like, we started seeing things right away. I mean, she had trouble sleeping. She was not making eye contact. She was not copying. She would rather be laid down for comfort instead of held. I mean, there were just a lot of things. And, I used to tease because people would always be like, oh, well, have you read this book? And, oh, have you read this book? And I'm always like, look, I read those books. Lily didn't read those books. She read some other book. So we're going to try to figure out, what she read. So
yeah, we're not given an owner's manual when they come out, are we?
Right. I know. I'm like, this isn't one size fits all. I'm sorry. So we wanted to figure out, what it was. And honestly, the first thing we checked was her hearing, because she was also not reactive to sound. Like, you could bang pots and pans behind her head and she was not turning. So we're like, okay, well, maybe it's a hearing thing. Who knows? But we had a pretty good inclination, there was something. So we did a bear scan in the hospital, where like they test the brainstem. They did that finally at 10 months old. And then when they came back from that and said that she was capable of hearing, we started testing for other things. Yeah. So after the scan came back and said that she was capable of hearing, we decided to start testing, for other things. And we kind of knew at that point. We had a suspicion that she was autistic. We were just kind of waiting for that checkbox to get us services and start the next step. So when she was diagnosed, there was never like, oh my God, really? We were like, okay, great. Now what? Let's do the things. How do we help her? So that we've started this a long time, basically. And since then we started taking, we did the parenting classes, and we started doing therapy and speech therapy and all the different things that they told us to do 10 years ago. Some things were great. Some things were not. And we quickly learned what was for us and what wasn't. And through it all, we tried to support communication. We hung up pictures all over our house trying to help her communicate with what she wanted and things like that. We tried sign language. That was not a fit for her. The motor planning thing just did not work for her. And when she was 2.5, we were very determined. Someone had suggested we try PECS. We tried it for like a minute. No way. That system was not a fit for us or for her. And at 2.5, we heard about an AAC device. And we didn't have anyone helping us. We didn't have a speech therapist. She was not in a school that was suggesting it or anything. We just found out about it, started doing research, and decided to buy one ourselves because we wanted to help her communicate as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. So we bought an iPad. My husband did research, which was really hard. I mean, 10 years ago, there were not parent sharing. There were not account sharing. There were not YouTube videos of every single app out there. Like, there really wasn't much of anything. But we did our research, and we chose Proloquo2Go based on whatever my husband found online, which was limited. He said he thought that was the best app to go with. And so we bought it. I downloaded it. I set it up myself. I did a horrible job. I had no clue what I was doing.
We do what we can when we can, right?
Yeah, I basically like deleted everything and made my own one from scratch, and then realized quickly, boy, was that not okay. But, started modeling language and teaching her things before she turned 3. She caught on really quickly. And then I caught on quickly to, hey, I got to improve this. This is not right. Let's go back and see what it should have looked like before I hacked it up. So she still has a very customized version, but through the years, I've spent a lot of time enhancing her language, improving the grid size. The more I learned, the more I improved. And then as time went on, there was more information available for me to learn more. There became classes I could take. There became speech therapists that I could talk to that I met online or I met organically. I started making contacts everywhere. And then I started helping other parents and started teaching classes and started going into schools to teach SLPs who hadn't learned about AAC and to teach teachers how to utilize them effectively in a classroom. And so basically just kind of immersed myself in AAC, and Lilly has been at the forefront of that journey forever, utilizing her device, growing with her device. I have videos I've posted of her, just this tiny little adorable thing, using her AAC device to tell us things. And then at around 7.5, she started using some vocal speech, but she has apraxia, so it's not exactly clear. But her vocal speech is definitely emerging in her own way. And then about a year to 2 years ago, I was introduced to the concept of being a GLP, and things just started clicking. And so now I've been learning as much about that as possible to support her in her device, to support other parents, to help her with everything. It's a lot.
Yeah. And if you could kind of impress upon our listeners who are primarily school-based SLPs, school-based teachers, thinking about Lilly, thinking about her language development as a GLP, what would you want them to know, or what would you want them to be able to prioritize?
Oh, goodness. Well, thinking of Lilly, lean in to the gestalts, lean in to the things that the kids that you're working with click with. Don't immediately try to fix everything that they're doing. Use it. When you hear them say a funny phrase, repeat it, make it fun, record it, especially on the AAC device. You want to lean into it. You want to support it. They have to be able to, enjoy and use their scripts, learn more scripts, collect their own library of things that they connect with and start to process with before you ever start to break it down. And have some fun with their scripts, have some fun mix and matching. They're going to learn language if you are leaning into the way of learning and not trying to make them learn in a different way.
Yeah, I love what you said, like build it up, build it up, build it up, build it up before you tear it down, and help them mixing and matching, work through those stages, lean in and really try and customize those devices. Absolutely. And support whatever special interests they have, and not kind of put a label on, oh, she's this age, we're not going to do this anymore. Throw it out the window and just lean into it, because if this is how she's learning, let's go with it.
Yes, absolutely. And honestly, people learn by what motivates them. They're not going to be motivated by something that feels inherently wrong, or something that's upsetting to them, or something that takes what was joyful or that they had like a connection to and acting as if there's something wrong with it. And especially children are not going to be motivated by that, but when you latch on to what they connect with and you use that's when things start to click and things start to grow and expand. So yeah, definitely.
Love it. Absolutely. And then what would be some challenges, risks, or pitfalls? I know you had kind of mentioned one before, but thinking about customizing in P2Go for Augcom users.
Yeah, so the beauty and the curse of Proloquo2Go is that it is so customizable. And one of the things that happens, honestly, with all users of Proloquo2Go, especially if someone doesn't know what they're doing very well, like well-meaning parents, or maybe someone who hasn't had much exposure, one thing they do is they take away a ton of language. They give it a tiny little grid size. They don't utilize the things that are built in there. Oh, sorry.
And when we say tiny little grid size, you mean 1, 5, 10 buttons instead of 35, 42, 60, 75 buttons. So a big grid size versus a small grid size.
Yes, big
more
grid
buttons.
Size.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Big grid size is small buttons. Small grid size is big buttons.
Yeah, sometimes that gets a little confusing.
Yeah, sorry. But
no.
I mean, people cannot learn what they do not have access to. No. And if you don't give them enough buttons to learn and grow, you are locking them in to just some basics. And we're not trying to teach children who are 3, 4, 5, whatever age that you're working with, to only know the words that they have right now. They need to grow, which means they need access to more. And even if I usually say don't use less than a 60 button grid size, 6 by 10 on Proloquo2Go, the recommended is 7 by 11, but I usually go, okay, you can go 6 by 10, you can try it. But anything less than that, and it's actually harder. It's harder because you have to maneuver in and out of more folders to find what you're looking for. And it's easier if most things are on the screen, on the home screen, so that as they're learning, it's available. There's more folders available, just all sorts of things. So one of the challenges specific to GLPs, not only that people can customize it and have less buttons, but also a big pitfall is that people get excited about all the gestalts and all the phrases they want to give to someone, and then they remove the single buttons and replace them with gestalts and phrases, which should not happen. You should add phrases and add gestalts into a system, but never instead of the language. Because the goal is we want them to have these things, but eventually they're going to learn how to break them down. They're going to learn how to mix and match. They're going to learn how to say different things. They need access to both. They need access to pre-formatted phrases, and they need access to single words. It's not one or the other. And that one is a big problem in Proloquo2Go. I see parents taking out words like want and to and eat and making a button that says, I want to eat, I want to drink, I want to whatever. And I'm like, okay, one, I want is not the only sentence people say. Like, stop only doing that. But two, if you add those phrases in there, add them in there appropriately, but keep the single words. So, because they might not always want to eat. They might not want to eat. They might want to talk about something they ate. There's a whole bunch of words out there. They might want to just talk about food items without having to say, I want to eat first. Like, we are taking away organic thought and expression, and we're taking away autonomy to choose what they wish to say by only having pre-formatted phrases in these devices. So that would be one of the biggest mistakes I've seen, is people get all excited and then they start taking away language. And it's an add, it's not an instead.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, as school teams, we need to have these conversations with parents and like definitely embrace that when these devices are going home, that parents need to know the why behind that, because we hear and we're telling parents, these are GLPs and they need to have those phrases, but also like, let's be forward thinking and think long term about, okay, we need both those phrases, and we need to think long term about when it gets broken down, how can they build up their own organic language? And then long term, if we're adding a gestalt in, we're not going to delete it because they might need to fall back on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely accurate.
What are some opportunities or growth for growth or learning if a listener would want to learn more about this topic? And can you tell us a little bit more about Lily's voice as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, first, about learning about GLP and AAC. One, I love Instagram. I know that social media can be toxic and dangerous, and I get that. But as far as I'm concerned, Instagram has the most educational, least toxic community if you are finding and following the right people. On this topic specifically, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And let's hear your handle. So if people want to see Lilly in action and get a glimpse into her language and her AAC, that they can follow you.
Awesome. Yeah. So my account is a friend for Lillybug, and there's 2 L's in the middle. So, it's a friend for Lilly bug. That is my account where you can see Lilly. And then we also have.
And she is so sweet. And one of her special interests is Sesame Street. And whenever I see it, I'm like, oh, my heart, I love her.
Yeah, she loves Sesame Street, and like almost all of her gestalts are from Sesame Street because that's her interest, and so we have a lot of fun with Sesame Street.
Embrace it, right?
We love it. We're all obsessed now. Team Elmo for sure. So yeah, that's our personal one, a friend for Lilybug, and then my nonprofit, which I'll share a little bit more about in a second, is Lily's Voice. Again, 2 L's in Lilly, and then I would say 3 accounts. In addition, there's a bunch, and I've listed them in the Lily's Voice Instagram. Actually, I have a highlight where you can look and see people I suggest you follow. But 3 key accounts I would follow to learn more about GLP and AAC specific to GLP. One would be meaningful speech. Absolutely follow that account led by Alex. So much great information. Sorry, go ahead.
Also, I think it's really important to follow on Instagram because things change and it's important to see therapy in action.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And the course that you mentioned, oh man, she has some free materials and stuff right now, but the paid course, she has a GLP course. And I actually was lucky enough to take one in person as well. And then there's also an AAC and GLP course, like an actual course, just AAC and GLP, which is
that my coworker Laura Hayes has produced and collaborated on.
Mm-hmm.
And that is for free if you have signed up through your strand, and you have that for life. So if you haven't taken that course already, you can go back in, use your same username, log in through the district, and then access that course.
Awesome. Yeah. And you just plugged Laura, because I was going to say account number 2, AAC Innovations.
Homegrown in our district. Yep.
There you go. Make sure you're following. Oh, Laura is amazing. So appreciative of her knowledge. So make sure that you're following that account. And then I would say one more, GLP specialist. It's a lot of the same information, but maybe presented in different fashions or different explanations. Boho Speechy is another specific to GLP SLP who is sharing information online, and will also show AAC in action with GLPs, which sometimes when you hear something, seeing it is different. Seeing in action is different. I love that. That's one of the things I love about the meaningful speech courses is you can actually see children progressing in different gestalt stages.
And that's what I love about following specifically a friend for Lilly Bug, is to see Lilly grow and learn, and you guys change and adapt over time. And just to see it happening naturally in your home is going to be very different than when, sometimes we see kids 2 times a week for 30 minutes in a very sterile therapy setting or in the classroom, and it's not as organic, or we can't always know what these scripts mean, even if we are doing the detective work, even if we are collaborating with parents. So that's kind of that fun, letting through Instagram, letting through social media, through podcasts, like let it break the wall. Don't feel like, you have to like separate your life. SLP is this and home life is this. Like let it all kind of blend together, because it is a really cool thing to be able to see.
It is. And actually, because you mentioned that, I would like to throw out one more Instagram account. She actually just joined my board. The name of the account is Siblings on the Spectrum. The mom who runs that account is Jessie. She has 2 GLPs. One, his buddy is non-speaking and autistic, and he uses AAC with LAMP, which is so interesting because he had another program and then he wasn't doing that great. He gravitated to LAMP. And so even the mom's like, Jessie's having to learn LAMP, but they're figuring out how to make it work for a GLP on LAMP. And then she has a daughter, Lila, who is very verbal. And she is a GLP, and she has just really progressed through the years with her stages of language. And so it's really cool to kind of see the contrast of 2 completely different kiddos in the same house, and how their mom supports them. And she is a new board member on Lily's Voice, which is
we
really
are
cool.
having Jessie on this season as well. So I don't
cool.
know. Yeah.
Awesome. Even better.
Yeah. Yes.
Very cool.
And then we close with this last question that we ask all of our guests. Can you share a story about a favorite AAC moment?
Oh man, I have so many, because it's Lily's first language. And I'd say one of the things that I love that I did, and I wish I would have done even more of, was I recorded her using her AAC when she was really little, because that was, those were her first words. And a lot of parents, I think, forget that. Like, you want to video your kids saying their first words on the device. And so I have a lot of amazing moments. I would say my favorite, and this is vague again, but when I add a gestalt into her device and then I model it or coordinate it with something she's doing, the way that her face lights up is something that is just unmatched. And we get those moments a few times a week where like we kind of discover something new, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to add it in here and see what she thinks. And even though vocal speech is currently her preferred, which I have to work really hard to support her in, because I'm very much like, I love the AAC. Like, let's use the device, like, which I don't do that to her. So I just model. But when I do add her gestalts and additional things into her device based on what she's saying vocally, which isn't clear, the way that she's kind of like, you get it, like you understood, like this is how we're doing it. And then she goes in and she immediately goes to town and starts having fun. That is, that's when you know you're doing it right. And that just makes me really happy to see her light up, and it makes me light up. So
I have a similar clinical moment where a mom had called me and was like, the student had totally lost her voice. Like she had, I don't know, like laryngitis or something. And she said she just laid in bed and was pressing all the gestalts that I had just added and was just listening to it and was just like smiling and was so happy, even though she was so sick. And I was like, oh, my heart is just so happy.
Yeah, that's so cool. But yeah, it's really neat when our kids get to really feel understood and supported, and they're having fun. I mean, that's a big important part of AAC. People forget this is not a clinical tool. I mean, you may use it in that fashion for some things, but it is a language tool. It is a communication tool. It is a life tool. It is not a task. It's not clinical. It's not intended to be you sit at a table and you hit what I want you to hit on this device. Like, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed
Language
to be organic.
is messy. Yeah.
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 So that's my favorite.
Well, I love that. And thank you so much for sharing with us. I think you're such an asset to our district. Thank you for coming on. This has
Thank
been
you for
another,
having me.
you are so welcome. It's been another good episode of AAC Innovative Solutions.
Thank you.
So for this week's innovative activity, I think this is another faves of most people, but this is Zingo. So it's bingo with a zing or with a twist. If you're not familiar with it, it's you have your bingo cards, and there's nine symbols on a card, and then you have front and back, so you can pick either one. And then the idea is that you slide this little fella, and then two symbols pop out. And then those are the ones that you mark on your bingo card. So for this one, I have fish. Fish is not on my bingo card. I would just keep going. But I want to tell you how I might use this for a GLP AAC user. So if they're in stage 1, obviously this is going to be really great for someone who is in stage 3 because it can reference, right? We've got apple, owl, cat, shoe, bunny, dog. These are great for referencing. But for someone who is in an earlier stage and I'm modeling gestalts, I might just, this makes a little sound when it comes down. So, and we could talk about, oh, it's a bird, it's a cat, it's moving. Let's get more. Let's see it. What is it? What's next? What's it gonna be? And we can just talk through and model potential gestalts that are mitigable in stage 1 just by moving and the element of surprise of what could potentially pop out of this thing. You want to get really crazy. You could also have the symbols on the AAC system and you could have them pop out as well, or just have a little piece of tape and tape your symbols on here too. So that would be extra exciting. But just having that, like, let's do it, let's move it, and modeling that. If we're in stage 2, we're going to be mixing and matching that, right? So it's an apple, it's a sun. It kind of naturally lends itself to that too. Let's see, let's do it again. Let's get more, gotta get more. And so we're going to be mixing and matching. And then, as I mentioned, in stage 3, we can just reference. We can do lots of referential language around what's on our board and what comes out of the Zingo machine. Super quick, super easy activity to model language around depending upon what language stage your GLP is in. So check it out in the IRC. It's also a really good one, I would say, if you have a group of analytic language processors and Gestalt language processors and you can't see them one-on-one. This is a good one to have in our toolbox. So hope you check it out. Hope you enjoy.